And joining us right now on the phone, a Congressmember Karen Bass, representing the 37th District here in Los Angeles. Representative Bass, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. We noted your tweet that came out immediately after the news conference this morning, and I'll read it to our viewers right now as we put it up on the screen. It's now clear this Attorney General does not work for us. He works for President Trump. This press conference was a final desperate cry to keep the truth away from the American people. We're not falling for it. Give us the report. Would you care to elaborate?
Sure. I think for somebody who I believe has had a very good reputation, I think he's certainly compromised it now. To have the press conference, I think, to begin with, was inappropriate. But what he said in the press conference, exonerating the president, no collusion, he repeated that 6 or 7 times. I thought I was looking at a press conference from the White House as opposed to a press conference from the Attorney General. I have the report in front of me. Some of the things that he said is just a spin, because when you actually look at the report, it's not the way it is written. And so I think, I'm glad the report was released. It is redacted, but I have to tell you that it's not as much as I anticipated. I will wait to see the redacted parts, though, which we will be able to do when I get back, when we're back in session.
Representative Bass, where do Democrats want to go from here with this? We know House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler had said it's clear Congress and the American people must hear from Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, well, we're having a conference call shortly in the Judiciary Committee, and we'll be able to strategize. But I will tell you that I know that the chairman is calling for Mueller to come and testify. But what we are doing right now is what everyone else is doing, is actually reading the report and deciphering what is in the report. And I think that what you will find is that what the Attorney General today did was essentially spin for the news so you could have the talking points. But when you get into it, there is a gulf of difference between what the Attorney General said and what is actually in this report.
There are a number of portions that are subject to interpretation with regard to obstruction of justice. Several instances that were subject to interpretation. The special counsel left it to the Attorney General to make the final decision on that. Was that appropriate?
Well, I'm not exactly sure that was the case. I mean, there are 10 examples of where it could be interpreted that the president obstructed justice. But I think what Mueller says in the beginning of the report, which again I think we heard spin earlier, is that he was not going to make a recommendation around obstruction because he knows a sitting president cannot be indicted. So essentially what he did was left it to Congress in our role. So maybe the Attorney General, maybe Mueller felt that he couldn't say he needed to be indicted, but he gave 10 examples of potential obstruction. And so it's really hard to see from these examples, and again, we're all just reading it at first blush, it looks pretty obvious in some of them that obstruction of justice, the only thing that held him back was the fact that a sitting president couldn't be indicted.
I want to ask you, there are some Americans who are saying this has been 2.5 years. This is what our lawmakers have been focused on for this amount of time. No obstruction of justice, no collusion. Let's move on and do other work for the country. What do you say to those Americans who are feeling that way?
Well, I say to those Americans, they're right in terms of us doing other work. Unfortunately, we have been doing a lot of other work. We've been passing legislation on guns, on health care, a variety of things. But because this is an issue that is overwhelming to our country, the work that we actually do beyond this report doesn't rise to the level of a lot of coverage. So this is critically important, though. We are talking about the President of the United States, the most important, powerful person on the planet. And if there is evidence that he has had criminal behavior, corruption, etc., it is absolutely our responsibility to address that. What is different is that for the last 2 years, when the Republicans were in control, they did no oversight, they did no investigation. By the Constitution, that is a part of our job. So we are only fulfilling what the Constitution has determined the role of Congress should be.
it is up to the Attorney General to decide whether or not to indict the sitting president. Justice Department guidelines suggest that that's not something that can be done, but Congress can impeach. Is there anything that you've seen so far that would suggest that the Democrats in Congress will now move to that next step?
No, not just yet. I mean, again, I think we have to thoroughly read and analyze this report. I think there's a lot of hearings that we need to hold. As you know, Speaker Pelosi has not wanted to go down that road at all. However, I think that with all of the information we have, and remember, we still have multiple investigations that are pending, and so I think that it will be a while. We don't want to go down the road of impeachment because it does take us away from the good work that we've been doing. However, if we have to, then we will. I will tell you, I will remind you, though, that this Attorney General essentially said in the 19-page memo he wrote months ago, he essentially said what his opinions would be, and he has acted them out. He has not veered away from the 19-page memo that I call his audition from anything that he said over the last few days.
What we do know after hearing and seeing the Mueller report is that Russia did interfere in the 2016 election, and I think many people also saying, well, looking ahead, there's another election that's going to be here before you know it. Are we making sure that this doesn't happen again?
You are absolutely right, and that is a big concern of mine, and I will tell you that we'll see what happens in this Congress, because in the last Congress, we were not able to get the Republicans to agree to even look at our vulnerabilities in terms of our election and put the resources there to address issues that we know are happening. So I think that's critically important.
Is there anything, and I know that you're still absorbing the hundreds of pages here, but is there anything that has jumped out at you so far, a page number, a passage, anything that you are aware of that as we're doing the same thing, that you would want to point out?
Honestly, the first and the second page of the executive summary, yes, where essentially Mueller is saying that the Russians interfered and that representatives of the Trump campaign, perceived that it would benefit from what the Russians were doing. And then later on it says, but the difference was that it doesn't seem as though there was an agreement. In other words, that Paul Manafort didn't say, yes, we agree, but yet both sides were doing what was amounting to cooperating with each other. So that's a nuance. Again, I am not a lawyer. That's a nuance that's difficult for me to see. If both sides knew that this information was benefiting them, then how is that not collusion? And remember, one of the other things that Mueller says in the first page is that collusion is not a crime. So the fact that the president has gotten us all adjusted to using this word over and over again, knowing well in advance that it's not a crime, conspiracy is the crime. And so when the AG says there's no collusion, well, Mueller says, well, we weren't really even looking at that. We were looking at conspiracy.
Many Democrats, some Democrats, have been attacking AG Barr's character and saying things. Nancy Pelosi has said she doesn't trust him, she trusts Mueller. Rod Rosenstein, Deputy AG, who hired Mueller, been with the department for 30 years, was quoted as saying, with Barr at the helm, the rule of law is secure. How do you feel when you hear Rod Rosenstein talk this way about AG Barr?
I appreciate you asking that. He's been a disappointment to me because at one point he seemed as though he was objective and then he didn't. But you do have to remember that when the president fired Comey, remember that Rosenstein wrote that memo saying that the reason why Comey was being fired was because of Hillary Clinton and the way he didn't protect Hillary Clinton, which was ludicrous. But Rosenstein was the one that wrote that memo. Now, he wrote the memo under the direction of the president, but he still put his name on it. Now, after that, I've been in hearings with him a number of times, and I know that he has objected fiercely to the way the president has attacked the FBI, the Justice Department, etc. So I was hoping that he'd be a bit more objective, but I don't feel that way now, not the way he has responded to this situation.